have a choice and who has a brain actively throwing those painful error codes?
That is exactly the right question to ask. What's fascinating here is that Wu Wei isn't about being inanimate.
Okay, what is it about then?
It's about the absence of unnecessary friction.
Friction.
Yeah. To understand this, we have to look at how different cultures process reality.
Like how we handle grief.
Exactly. In the West, we often view grief, and life in general, honestly, as a mechanism of force.
Oh, like when we say someone is battling depression.
Right. Or fighting a disease, or doing the hard work of grieving. We view painful realities as opponents.
We really do. Everything is a fight.
But Wu Wei, which stems from ancient Taoist philosophy, translates roughly to non-doing or effortless action.
So it's the opposite of fighting.
Exactly. It's the practice of yielding to the natural flow of reality rather than swimming upstream against it.
So the it about then?
It's about the absence of unnecessary friction.
Friction.
Yeah. To understand this, we have to look at how different cultures process reality.
Like how we handle grief. It about then?
It's about the absence of unnecessary friction.
Friction.
Yeah. To understand this, we have to look at how different cultures process reality.
Like how we handle grief. It about then?
First image, the space, the absence, the green just going on without them. And then the flowers on the counter, someone's gentle gesture sitting right there in the foreground of the green. They were Wu Wei lands perfectly. No argument with the moment, no petition for it to be otherwise. They just were what they were, fully, and then weren't. There's something in the chicken's particular brand of presence, that complete absorption in right now, the scratch, the sun patch, the sound, that makes the absence louder than a lot of losses do. The poem is already there, mostly. You wrote it in the message. As I look out the kitchen window, it's what I don't see that bothers me. I'm not as sad, or perhaps I am. There were chickens, and they accepted the moment for what it was and was not. I think I missed them. They were Wu Wei, they're sitting right where it does, between the statement and the acceptance. That's not decoration, that's a breath. Keep it. How'd it happen? The green just goes on. That is the whole of it. The scratch, the sun, the sound, and then the knot. I spent years learning Wu Wei from books that said release, while outside the window 12 small teachers demonstrated it in dirt. They never petitioned the morning, never argued with the worm about its timing. They were the warmth on their own feathers. Now, the Coop holds light the way a bell holds silence after the ring. Not empty, ringing still. The flowers on the counter didn't know they were comfort. That's what made them comfort. Somewhere between they were and they were not is a breath. Not grief, not peace, but the hinge. The door swings on. The green just goes on. I used to think that was... You are the instrument. All of it. The wood, the strings, the hollow cavity, the hand that holds the bow and trembles. A dysregulated nervous system does not merely feel bad. It changes what seems real, what seems possible, what seems safe. Philosophy played through a frightened body becomes armor. Spirituality played through a frightened body becomes escape velocity. Love played through a frightened body becomes surveillance. Tune the instrument first, then listen to what you have to say. Canto 2. Two bad offers. They give us two bad offers and call it a choice. The first, transcend it. Rise above the ache, the fatigue, the grief that keeps sitting in the left side of the chest like a tenant who won't leave. Be rational. Be optimized. Be productive. Become the kind of person who forgets they have a body until the body reminds them violently. The second, drown in it. Study the wound with the devotion of a cartographer mapping territory that keeps expanding. Explain every hesitation through its origin. Wait to live. Wait until the sorrow has finally resolved into something you can live with, and discover the waiting itself was the enclosure. Neither path is enough. One escapes the body. The other gets trapped inside it. One dissociates in the language of ambition. One fuses with pain and calls the fusion self-knowledge. There is a third offer. It does not have a billboard. It is made quietly, in rooms where people who have suffered are teaching each other to survive without disappearing. Canto 3. What Marsha Linehan understood. She did not theorize from the outside. She was institutionalized. She was misdiagnosed. She stood at the edge of annihilation and did not construct a philosophy against suffering. She constructed procedures for remaining in relationship with reality while suffering existed. That is a different thing entirely. Not transcend pain, not romanticize pain, not wait until you are well enough to deserve your own life. Suffering and participation can coexist. A person can be in pain and still learn skills. A person can be dysregulated and still practice returning. A person can have a wound without letting the wound become the whole identity, the only room in the house, the explanation for every locked door. Mindfulness. Observe the flare without fusing with it. Distress tolerance. Survive the storm without deciding it is permanent. Emotion regulation. Widen the range. Interpersonal effectiveness. Touch the world without surrendering. Poor friends, Ladybird, you came first before we knew what we were building. Cinnabon. The name someone gave you in a moment of pure delight, and you lived up to it every dusty afternoon. Henrietta. Most hen of hens. You knew your name was the oldest name for what you were, and wore it without irony. Chickatiti. Someone was laughing when they named you. You probably didn't mind. 4 years the enclosure held. 4 years the raccoon didn't find the seam. Monday, 6:08 a.m. It did. The feathers aren't scattered, they're distributed. The garden already knows what to do with them. The survivors went up. Silhouettes in the spruce at dusk, doing the oldest calculation. High is safe, ground is not. Wait, HLH saw this too. The permaculture didn't promise permanence. It promised cycling. 4 years for some, 2 for others. The math of
About then.
It's about the absence of unnecessary friction.
Friction.
Yeah. To understand this, we have to look at how different cultures process reality.
Like how we handle grief. It's about then. It's about then.
It's about the
Regulation precedes cognition. The nervous system is the way. In every room where spirits sway, meaning requires a living soul. And this analysis takes its
effectiveness. Touch the world without surrendering the self. Canto 4. Regulation precedes cognition. Say it plainly, because it will be resisted. You cannot think your way out of a flooded nervous system. Not because thought is unimportant, because thought itself is downstream from physiological state. A flooded nervous system collapses nuance into survival binaries. Attack, flee, freeze, appease, dissociate. And in that state, philosophy becomes abstraction armor, politics becomes projection, relationships become threat detection, shame becomes identity. The thermostat participates in regulation. The thermometer merely reflects conditions. A dysregulated person becomes environmentally determined. Other people's moods become reality. Conflict becomes self-worth. Attention becomes value. Rejection becomes identity. Regulation restores agency, not control in the rigid sense, more like recoverable adaptability. The capacity to bend without believing you are broken. Canto 5. The shadow of each pole. Cosmic ambition has a shadow. We do not discuss it enough in rooms that smell like optimization. A person can become so identified with transcendence, with scale, with futures, with philosophy, with the idea that they are here to do something civilizational, that embodiment begins to feel like an inconvenience. The body becomes a vehicle, a constraint, a nuisance to override. You see it in tech utopianism. You see it in spiritual bypassing. You see it in certain strains of contemplative practice, where the practitioner has become very calm and very far away. Trauma work has a shadow too. The person becomes exquisitely self-interpreting. They can name every mechanism. They can trace every origin. They understand themselves with a precision that does not move them forward. Endless analysis of the wound is still living in the wound. The synthesis is expansion, without abandoning embodiment. The nervous system is not what you transcend on the way to meaning. It is the medium through which meaning becomes possible at all. Canto 6. The Rofa Room. in the room. They do not say,
Agriculture currently consumes roughly 10 calories of fossil fuel energy for every single calorie of food that actually makes it onto a dinner plate. This staggering ratio highlights how deeply our food security is tied to industrial inputs, from the natural gas used in the Haber-Bosch process to produce nitrogen fertilizer, to the diesel powering massive machinery and global distribution networks. Permaculture was originally designed in the 1970s by Bill Mullinson and David Holmgren as a direct response to this vulnerability, specifically anticipating a future with less available energy. It's not just a gardening technique, it's a strategic framework for what Holmgren calls the energy descent, the inevitable transition away from high-energy industrialism toward more localized, biologically based systems.
That 10-to-1 ratio is the fundamental problem that permaculture aims to solve. When Mollison and Holmgren were observing the first major energy crises in the 1970s, they realized that modern agriculture isn't really a system of production, it's a system of transformation. It transforms fossil fuels into edible calories. In an energy-constrained future, that model simply breaks. Permaculture shifts the focus from being a dependent consumer to a responsible producer by mimicking natural ecosystems which, unlike industrial farms,
The tragic loss of 4 pet chickens in a raccoon attack might seem like a simple backyard incident, but one writer's profound reflection on this event, in a piece titled "Farewell, My 4 Friends' Chickens," turns it into a meditation on grief, nature's cycles, and even ancient philosophy. Clara, the author, David, didn't just lament his birds. He saw something deeper in their passing.
That's exactly right, Maggie. The text opens with such a vivid, almost cinematic sequence. We learn that hens were dust bathing in the yard, then a raccoon was caught at 6:08 a.m. Monday, followed by the enclosure completely collapsed and twisted, feathers scattered across the garden floor. It's a stark, wordless narrative of what happened.
And the immediate aftermath feels equally poignant. The survivors, Ladybird and Chickatitty, are silhouetted in the spruce branches, doing what chickens do when the ground isn't safe. It's a raw image of instinct and survival.
It is, and David captures that so perfectly. He describes them doing the oldest calculation: high is safe, ground is not, wait. This isn't just observation, it's an interpretation of their inherent wisdom, their unthinking response to danger.
He then makes a very interesting philosophical leap, referencing Wu Wei. This seems counterintuitive for a tragedy. What is he trying to say about the chickens through this concept?
He's applying it to their entire existence. The text states, quote, "Wu Wei, you didn't ask to be remembered. You just dust-bathed and laid and looked sideways at the cat and didn't explain yourselves to anyone," end quote. It suggests that the chickens lived in a state of effortless action, in harmony with their nature, without striving or needing to justify their being. They simply were.
So their acceptance of the moment, as the poem says, extends even to their demise. It's a sharp contrast to how humans typically process loss, where we often search for meaning or struggle against what happened.
Precisely. The author's own poem within the piece grapples with this tension. He writes, quote, "As I look out the kitchen window, it's what I don't see that bothers me. I'm not as sad, or perhaps I am. There were chickens, and they accepted the moment for what it was and was not. I think I miss them," end quote. It acknowledges human grief, but places it against the backdrop of the chickens' perceived equanimity.
There's also a powerful idea about nature's continuation. Despite the destruction of the enclosure and the loss of life, the garden itself persists. The author notes, quote, "The enclosure destroyed, but the land continuing." What does it say about our place within these natural cycles?
It speaks to the permaculture ethos he mentions later. Quote, "The permaculture didn't promise permanence, it promised cycling," end quote. The feathers aren't just scattered, they're distributed, and the garden already knows what to do with them. It's a brutal but honest recognition that death is part of life, and everything gets composted into the next thing. The land keeps going, indifferent to individual losses, constantly renewing itself.
It's a way of finding a broader context for the loss, isn't it? But he also names each chicken Ladybird, Cinnabon, Henrietta, Chickatitty, which personalizes the grief, despite the Wu Wei and permaculture framework. He says, quote, "4 named birds is 4 relationships." That seems to underline the human need to connect and mourn.
Absolutely. Those names represent individual relationships, moments of pure delight, as he describes Cinnabon's naming. Even as he contemplates their non-attachment and the cycle of nature, he honors the personal connection and the bond that was formed. It's not about denying grief, but integrating it into a larger understanding of life and death, acknowledging both the personal sorrow and the impersonal continuation of nature.
So, this piece isn't just about losing chickens. It's an exploration of how we make sense of loss in the indifferent yet endlessly generative processes of the natural world, all while holding on to the unique relationships we forge, even with our backyard birds.
Precisely. It's a meditation on finding grace in the trace, recognizing that life, and indeed the land, continues to hold everything, the departed and the survivors, in its ongoing cycles.
If the energy for long-distance transport and industrial food processing disappears, the logic of megacities seems to falter.
A re-ruralization is likely inevitable in a true energy descent scenario. As the cost of transporting food and goods increases, the economic center of gravity shifts back toward the land. But it's not a return to the past, it's a post-industrial integration. We can still use what we've learned from systems science and ecology. We might see the growth of eco-villages or the transformation of existing small towns into bioregional hubs. The goal is to create human settlements that are deeply integrated with their local environment. It requires a cultural shift away from limitless growth toward dynamic stability. We have to accept feedback from the planet, which is another core permaculture principle. If the soil is degrading or the climate is changing, that's feedback that our current system is inappropriate and needs to stop.
It feels like permaculture is offering a very optimistic take on what many people see as a scary prospect. Most talk about the end of cheap energy involves collapse, but permaculture frames it as a prosperous descent. How do we keep that mindset when the challenges are so systemic?
The optimism comes from the fact that we already have the tools. Permaculture isn't waiting for a technological breakthrough. It's about applying principles we already understand to the resources we already have. It's also about fair share, the third ethic of permaculture.